Hello, night listener, and welcome to Little Nightmare. I'm Emma, and tonight I'll be keeping you company to help you fall asleep. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Story 1. Most people don't think about the light. They assume it's just there, automatic. But I noticed something odd. When I open the door too quickly, the light is already on, before the seal even breaks, as if it knows I'm coming. But if I open it slowly, deliberately, there's a delay. And once, just once, I opened it silently and caught the bulb off, a shape in the dark standing motionless between the shelves. It vanished the instant the light flicked on. Now, I hesitate before opening it at all, not because I'm afraid of the dark, but because I'm afraid of what prefers it. The discovery began during one of those restless nights when sleep felt impossible. I had wandered to the kitchen, drawn by a thirst that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than my throat. The refrigerator hummed its familiar tune, a low mechanical lullaby that had become part of the house's heartbeat. But as I approached, the humming shifted. Not louder, not softer, different. Like a voice trying to form words through machinery. I reached for the handle and paused. The metal felt warm, though the appliance had been running all day. More than warm, it pulsed with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, as if the refrigerator had learned to synchronize with my body. The sensation traveled up my arm, a gentle current that made my skin tingle with anticipation. The light greeted me before I fully opened the door, already blazing, as if it had been waiting. The milk carton cast a shadow that seemed too long, stretching across the back wall like a finger, pointing to something I couldn't see. I grabbed what I needed and closed the door, but the image lingered. That shadow had moved independently, just for a moment, while the carton remained still. The following evening, I decided to test my observation. I approached the refrigerator with deliberate slowness, my bare feet silent against the cold tiles. The house settled around me with its usual creaks and sighs, but underneath, I caught something else. A whisper, so faint it might have been my imagination, coming from behind the white metal door. Not words exactly, but a rhythm. A pattern that suggested intelligence. This time, I opened the door with surgical precision. The light remained off for 3 full heartbeats. In that darkness, I saw it clearly. A figure, human-shaped, but wrong in proportions, standing between the condiment shelf and the produce drawer. It didn't move like a living thing. It simply existed, patient and still, as if it had been waiting there for decades. The moment the light engaged, it dissolved like smoke, leaving only the familiar arrangement of food and containers. I closed the door and stepped back, my skin erupting in goosebumps despite the warm kitchen. The refrigerator's hum deepened, almost satisfied, as if it had successfully hidden its secret once again. But I had seen. I knew. The next few days became an obsession. I started keeping a notebook, documenting every interaction with the appliance. The light's behavior followed patterns I couldn't predict. Sometimes it responded to my approach from across the room, flickering on before I even reached the handle. Other times, it remained stubbornly dark until I had pulled the door wide open, as if testing my resolve. The figure appeared more frequently now, always in the same position, always perfectly still, always vanishing the instant illumination touched it. But each sighting lasted slightly longer than the last. I began to make out details, clothes that seemed to belong to no particular era, skin that looked pale and cold, eyes that reflected no light even when the bulb blazed overhead. I tried photographing it, but the camera's flash triggered the light sensor, ruining every attempt. I tried recording video, but the darkness rendered everything invisible. The figure existed only in that specific moment between dark and light, in the space where my eyes could see, but technology could not capture. The smell started subtly, not the usual refrigerator sense of leftovers and produce, but something organic and unfamiliar. Sweet, like flowers, but underneath that sweetness lay something else. The scent of old fabric, of spaces long closed, of breath held too long. It grew stronger each night, seeping from the appliance, even when the door remained shut. I began to notice the cold, not just the expected chill from the refrigerator's interior, but a spreading coldness that seemed to flow from the appliance into the surrounding kitchen. The tiles beneath my feet grew icy, and my breath started to fog during my nightly visits. The house's heating system worked perfectly in every other room, but the kitchen had become a pocket of winter that defied explanation. The figure began to change. Its stillness gave way to subtle movements, a slight turn of the head, a shift in posture, fingers that seemed to grasp at the air. It was becoming more animated, more aware of my presence. And I realized with growing horror that it was learning to exist in the light. One night, I opened the door to find it facing me directly, not looking away or standing in profile, but turned toward toward the opening with deliberate intention. The light blazed as usual, but instead of dissolving, the figure remained for several seconds, its pale features becoming clearer, more defined. I could see the texture of its skin, the way its clothes hung loosely on its frame, the depth of its eyes as they focused on mine. I slammed the door shut and backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. The refrigerator's hum had become a growl, deep and threatening. The kitchen's temperature plummeted further, and frost began forming on the windows despite the mild weather outside. Something was changing, evolving, gaining strength from my attention. I tried to ignore the appliance, to break whatever connection had formed between us. But the cold followed me through the house now, creeping into my bedroom, my bathroom, my dreams. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, forming almost words that I couldn't quite understand, but somehow recognized. They spoke of patience, of waiting, of hunger that had lasted far longer than any living thing should endure. The breaking point came when I woke to find my kitchen transformed. Every surface was covered in frost, and the refrigerator door hung open, spilling its cold light into the room. But the light was wrong, too bright, too blue, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. And there, standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, was the figure. It had finally escaped its prison of darkness and light. No longer bound by the refrigerator's illumination, it stood free in my home, more solid than ever before. Its pale skin gleamed with condensation, and its breath formed clouds in the frigid air. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of ice cracking, of metal contracting in extreme cold. "You kept looking," it said, words that carried the weight of endless winters. "You kept feeding me with your attention. Now, I can finally step out of the spaces between moments." I ran. Through the house, out the front door, into the warm night air that felt like salvation against my frozen skin. Behind me, the house groaned and settled, and through the kitchen window, I could see that impossible blue light still blazing, casting its cold glow across my abandoned home. I never returned to that house, but sometimes, in other kitchens, in other homes, I catch myself hesitating before opening refrigerator doors. Because I know now that some lights are meant to stay hidden, that some darkness serves a purpose, and that attention can be a form of feeding. The cold still follows me, fainter now but persistent, a reminder that some things, once awakened, never truly go back to sleep. And late at night, when the world is quiet and still, I sometimes hear that familiar hum from whatever refrigerator is nearest. And I wonder if the figure is still there, still waiting, still patient, ready to step into the light for anyone curious enough to keep looking. Story 2. It's not a creak, not a groan. It's too soft, too purposeful. When I pretend I'm not paying attention, when I walk normally, casually, I catch the sound. Like someone whispering just beneath the boards. Not words, more like impressions, regret, warning, hunger. But when I stop, the noise vanishes. I laid down with my ear to the wood once. It whispered directly into the side of my head. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't dream either. I don't think the house wanted to give me anything I could forget. The first incident happened while I was making coffee. Steam rose from the cup, curling toward the ceiling in perfect spirals, and I found myself staring at the pattern when it happened. A gentle murmur beneath my bare feet, so faint I almost convinced myself it was the building settling. But buildings don't settle with such deliberate rhythm. They don't pause, as if waiting for acknowledgement. I pressed my heel down experimentally. Silence. The floorboards looked ordinary in the morning light, scratched hardwood, aged to a warm honey color. Nothing unusual about the grain or the gaps between planks. Yet, when I lifted my foot and placed it down again, naturally, without thinking, the whisper returned. A soft exhalation that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. That evening, I decided to document what I was hearing. I set up my phone to record, positioning it on the floor while I walked around the apartment. The playback revealed nothing but my footsteps and the ambient hum of the refrigerator. I tried different angles, different rooms. Still nothing. The whispers existed only in the moment, only when I wasn't trying to capture them. Sleep became elusive, not because of fear, but because of curiosity. I would lie in bed, listening to the house breathe around me, waiting for the soft voices to emerge from the wood. Sometimes they did, always when I wasn't expecting them. A gentle susurration that seemed to follow the rhythm of my own breathing, as if the floor were learning to match my pulse. The smell started on the third night. Cedar and something else, something metallic and organic, like old pennies left in rich soil. It would waft up from the gaps between the boards, strongest in the corners where shadows gathered. I searched for the source, crawling on hands and knees, pressing my nose to the wood. the scent disappeared the moment I focused on it, leaving only the faint dust and lemon oil I'd used to clean the floors. I began walking barefoot exclusively. The whispers responded to skin contact better than shoes. They grew more frequent, more insistent. Sometimes I caught fragments that almost sounded like words. Down or deeper or listen. But when I concentrated, trying to make sense of the syllables, they dissolved into meaningless breath. The temperature changes started subtly. Small variations in the woods, warmth beneath my feet. Certain boards felt almost fever hot, others cold enough to make me shiver. I mapped these spots with masking tape, creating a constellation of marked areas across the apartment. The pattern looked random at first, but over several nights, I noticed it was shifting. The cold spots migrated, following paths I couldn't predict. I started keeping a notebook, sketching the temperature patterns, recording the times and locations of the whispers. The pages filled quickly with frantic observations. Cold spot moved northwest corner to bathroom threshold. Whispers strongest near bedroom door, approximately 11 paces from window. Cedar smell accompanied by something sweet, almost floral. The more I documented, the more the phenomena intensified. The whispers grew bolder, occurring even when I was consciously listening. They began to layer, creating a soft chorus that seemed to emanate from the entire floor. I could feel vibrations through my feet, gentle pulses that traveled up my legs and settled in my chest like a second heartbeat. I pressed my ear to the floor again, this time in different locations. Each spot revealed a unique timbre. Near the kitchen, the whispers carried a hollow, echoing quality. By the bedroom, they were warmer, more intimate. The bathroom tiles remained stubbornly silent, but when I stepped back onto the hardwood, the voices returned with renewed vigor, as if they'd been waiting patiently for my return. My reflection in the bathroom mirror began to trouble me, not because of how I looked, but because of how the reflection behaved. Sometimes it seemed to lag slightly behind my movements, as if the image were traveling through something thicker than glass. Other times, I caught glimpses of movement in the reflected floor behind me, shadows that didn't correspond to anything in the actual room. I decided to test the boundaries. I brought in a small rug and placed it over the most active section of flooring. The whispers continued, muffled but persistent. I added more rugs, then a thick carpet. Still, The sounds persisted, now accompanied by a gentle pressure against the coverings, as if something were trying to push through from underneath. The breakthrough came when I removed all the coverings and lay flat against the floor, arms spread wide, ear pressed to the wood. The whispers converged beneath me, creating a complex harmony that seemed to tell a story without words. I felt the vibrations in my bones, in my teeth, in the hollow spaces behind my eyes. The floor grew warm, then hot, then burning against my skin. I should have moved. Every instinct screamed at me to pull away from the scorching wood. But the whispers had become a song, and the song was beautiful. It spoke of depths and darkness, of roots that reached through floorboards and foundation, of voices that had been waiting so long to be heard. The burning sensation transformed into something else, a melting, a merging, a becoming. When I finally rolled away, gasping, the apartment felt different. The whispers were louder now, more distinct. They followed me everywhere, no longer confined to the floor. They rose from the walls, drifted down from the ceiling, emerged from the spaces between atoms in the air itself. The temperature variations spread to every surface I touched. The cedar smell intensified, joined by earth and copper, and something that might have been old leather. I tried to leave. The doorknob burned my hand, but not with heat. With cold so intense, it felt like fire. The whispers rose to a crescendo, not words, but pure meaning flooding directly into my mind. Stay. Listen. Understand. The floor beneath my feet felt soft now, yielding, as if the hardwood had transformed into something organic and alive. I haven't tried to leave since. The whispers have become constant companions, a gentle background murmur that shapes my thoughts and dreams. Sometimes I catch my own voice joining their chorus, though I don't remember deciding to speak. The floor responds to my presence differently now, warming when I approach, cooling when I'm distant, pulsing with that familiar rhythm that matches my heartbeat so perfectly. The notebook sits abandoned on the kitchen counter, its pages filled with observations that seem naive now. How could I have thought I was documenting something external? The whispers weren't coming from beneath the floor. They were coming from within, drawn out by the house's patient influence, cultivated like seeds in fertile soil. I understand now why the recordings captured nothing. The whispers were never meant for machines. They were meant for flesh and bone, for the hollow spaces in human skulls, for the trembling membranes that separate thought from sensation. The floor didn't whisper to me. It whispered through me, teaching me to speak its language, to carry its voice into the waking world. The temperature changes continue, but they feel like caresses now. The cedar smell has become comforting, homey. When I walk barefoot across the hardwood, the whispers rise to greet me like old friends. They tell me stories of the earth below, of the roots that stretch deeper than foundation, of the network of voices that connects every dwelling, every resting place, every spot where humans have walked and lived and dreamed. I don't sleep much anymore. Not because I can't, but because the whispers are more interesting than dreams. They show me things, glimpses of other floors, other listeners, other voices joining the vast conversation that flows beneath our feet. I am part of something larger now, something that has been growing and learning and waiting for so long. The mirror still troubles me, but for different reasons. My reflection looks the same, but the floor beneath it has changed. In the glass, I can see the hardwood moving, breathing, pulsing with veins of light that correspond to the whisper's rhythm. Sometimes I see other shapes in the reflection, shadows that might be roots or fingers or something else entirely reaching up from the depths. I leave the apartment sometimes, but never for long. Other floors feel dead beneath my feet, silent and cold. The whispers follow me, fainter but persistent, calling me back to the place where I first learned to listen. The place where the conversation began, where it continues, where it will always continue. People visit occasionally. They comment on the warmth of the apartment, the pleasant smell of cedar, the way their footsteps seem to echo differently on the hardwood. But they don't hear the whispers. They haven't learned to listen properly. They haven't pressed their ears to the wood and allowed the voices to seep into their bones. I don't tell them what I've learned. They wouldn't understand. Not yet. But sometimes, when they're leaving, I notice them pause at the door, heads tilted slightly, as if they've heard something just beyond the edge of perception. A soft murmur, a gentle invitation. The first notes of a song that has been playing since the earth was young, waiting for the right ears to finally hear it. The whispers grow stronger every day. They're teaching me new words now, new ways of listening, new depths to explore. Soon, I think, I'll be ready to understand what they're really saying. Soon, I'll be ready to whisper back. Story 3. The water pressure started changing, pulsing in odd rhythms, like it was sinking to something else. I leaned close to the tiles. That's when I heard it, another stream, faint and far off, running behind the wall. Not plumbing, mirroring. I turned my water off. The sound behind the tiles kept going. I knocked. Silence. Then a soft drip in reply, as if whoever was using the other shower had noticed me. Now, even when I dry off and walk away, I hear that phantom stream, like someone behind the wall is still rinsing something I can't see. The steam had been curling differently that morning, spiraling counterclockwise against the natural flow of the ventilation. I stood there, water running down my shoulders, watching the vapor dance in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. The bathroom had become my sanctuary over the past few weeks, a place where I could think clearly, where the noise of the world outside couldn't penetrate. But something had shifted in the silence. The tiles felt warmer than usual under my fingertips. Not the comfortable warmth of hot water, but something deeper, emanating from within the wall itself. I pressed my palm flat against the ceramic surface, feeling a subtle vibration, barely perceptible, like a heartbeat through stone. The grout lines seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, creating a hypnotic pattern that drew my attention deeper into the wall's surface. I began documenting everything. Each shower became an investigation. The water temperature fluctuated in sequences I started to recognize. 3 degrees warmer, then cooler, then back to normal. The pressure would drop precisely when I reached for the shampoo, as if responding to my movements. I kept a notebook on the bathroom counter, wrapped in plastic, recording each anomaly with the precision of a scientist studying an unknown phenomenon. The sound behind the wall grew more distinct with each passing day. Not the familiar groaning of old pipes or the whistle of air trapped in the system. This was water flowing with purpose, following a path that mirrored my own movements. When I turned to face the wall, the sound would shift position. When I moved to the corner, it followed, always maintaining the same distance, always staying just out of reach. I tried playing music during my showers, hoping to mask the sound, but it adapted. The phantom stream would change its intensity, matching the rhythm of whatever I played. During slow songs, it would slow to a gentle trickle. During faster tracks, it would rush with renewed vigor. It was learning, evolving, becoming more sophisticated in its mimicry. The scent of lavender began appearing without explanation. I used unscented soap, unscented shampoo. Nothing that could produce such a specific fragrance. Yet there it was, subtle but unmistakable, drifting through the steam like a message from behind the tiles. The smell would intensify when I stood closest to the wall, as if something on the other side was responding to my presence. I started staying longer in the shower, testing the boundaries of this strange interaction. The water bill became irrelevant. What mattered was understanding the pattern, decoding the message hidden within the ceramic barrier. I would stand motionless for minutes, listening, feeling, trying to sense what lay beyond the familiar surface of my bathroom wall. The reflection in the shower door began showing inconsistencies. Small at first, a shadow that didn't quite match my movements, a distortion in the glass that created false images. But as the days passed, the discrepancies became more pronounced. Sometimes I would see two figures in the reflection, both moving in perfect synchronization, separated only by the thickness of the wall between us. I purchased a stethoscope, pressing it against different sections of the tile work, mapping the sounds with methodical precision. The phantom shower had its own geography, areas where the sound was strongest, dead zones where it disappeared entirely. I drew diagrams, creating a blueprint of the invisible space that existed parallel to my own bathroom. The tiles themselves began showing signs of change. Hairline cracks appeared in patterns that defied structural logic. They formed geometric shapes, almost like a language written in the ceramic itself. I traced these lines with my finger, feeling the slight depression where the surface had weakened, as if something was pushing through from the other side. My sleep became restless. Even in bed, I could hear the distant sound of water running, the soft echo of someone else's nightly routine. I would wake in the middle of the night, drawn to the bathroom, compelled to press my ear against the wall, and listen to the phantom presence, continuing its endless ritual. The breakthrough came during a particularly long shower. I had been standing there for over an hour, documenting temperature variations, when I heard something new. Not water, but breathing. Soft, rhythmic, perfectly synchronized with my own respirations. I held my breath. The sound stopped. I exhaled slowly. It resumed, matching my pattern exactly. I began speaking to the wall, my voice echoing strangely in the enclosed space. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. The phantom stream paused, just for a moment, before resuming with what seemed like increased intensity. "Are you there?" I asked, louder this time. The sound shifted, moving from left to right, as if someone was walking along the opposite side of the wall. The interaction became more complex. I would tap patterns against the tiles, and the phantom stream would respond with its own rhythmic variations. We developed a crude form of communication, a language of water pressure and ceramic resonance. I felt less alone, knowing that someone or something was sharing this strange experience with me, but the connection came with a price. The boundary between my bathroom and the phantom space began to blur. I would reach for the soap and feel it slip through my fingers, as if my hands were no longer entirely solid. The water that touched my skin felt different, carrying with it sensations that belonged to someone else's shower, someone else's body. The final revelation came when I noticed the drain. Water was flowing up through it, not down. A thin stream, barely visible, rising from the depths and disappearing into the wall where the phantom shower originated. I knelt down, peering into the darkness below, and saw something that made my understanding collapse entirely. There was no second bathroom, no parallel space, no other person. The phantom shower was mine, my own reflection, my own movements, somehow displaced in time and space. I was listening to myself from another moment, another possibility, another version of reality where the same routine played out with slight variations. The realization should have brought relief, but instead it brought terror. If the phantom shower was my own echo, then what did that make me? Was I the original, or was I the reflection? The question hung in the steam-filled air, unanswered and unanswerable. I still shower every day, but now I know the truth. The person behind the wall is me, and I am the person behind the wall. We exist in the same space, separated only by the thinnest membrane of reality. Sometimes I wonder if the other version of myself has figured it out too, if he's standing there right now, listening to my phantom stream, wondering who's really on which side of the tiles. The water keeps running, and I keep listening, because even knowing the truth, I can't stop the routine. The phantom shower has become more real than my own, and somewhere in the space between the tiles, between one moment and the next, the boundary continues to dissolve, leaving me trapped in an endless loop of my own making. Story 4. I vacuum every week, I check under the furniture, but each time the dust returns in the same places, but never the same shape. I started taking photos, comparing them. There's a pattern, loops, slashes, spirals. Once it looked like an eye staring back up at me. I swept it away. That night, I dreamt of being watched from the floorboards. Now the patterns are larger, more complex, like handwriting without a language. I think it's trying to communicate. Or maybe it's leaving warnings for something that isn't me. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the usual mustiness of accumulated dust, but something sharper, metallic, like pennies left in a damp palm. It drifted from beneath the couch whenever I moved it to clean. A scent that made my teeth ache and my tongue taste copper. I attributed it to old coins that had fallen between the cushions. But when I checked, I found nothing but the dust formations I'd grown accustomed to documenting. My routine had become ritualistic. Every cleaning session began with photographing the patterns before disturbing them. The images filled my phone's memory. Dozens of shots showing the same corner of hardwood floor, the same gathering of particles that somehow arranged themselves into increasingly elaborate designs. What started as simple curves had evolved into intricate geometries that seemed to pulse with intention, even in the stillness of captured photographs. The patterns weren't random. They followed rules I couldn't decipher, responding to my presence in ways that defied explanation. When I knelt to examine them closely, the formations appeared to shift slightly, as if adjusting to my perspective. The dust particles caught the light differently depending on the angle of my gaze, creating shadows that formed secondary patterns within the primary design. Sometimes I thought I saw movement in my peripheral vision, a gentle swirling, a subtle rearrangement. But when I turned my head directly, everything remained perfectly still. I started keeping a journal alongside the photographs. Each entry documented not just the visual appearance of the patterns, but their texture, their scent, the way they made my skin crawl when I crouched too close. The dust felt different under my fingertips than ordinary household debris. It was finer, almost silky, and it clung to my skin with a persistence that regular washing couldn't remove. Even after scrubbing my hands raw, I could still feel traces of it between my fingers. A gritty reminder of something I couldn't quite grasp. The sounds began subtly. At first, I thought it was the building settling, the normal creaks and sighs of old wood adjusting to temperature changes. these noises had a rhythm, a deliberate quality that suggested purpose rather than random structural movement. They emerged from the floorboards directly beneath the couch, soft scratching sounds like fingernails dragging across wood grain. The scratching intensified whenever I approached with my camera, as if the source knew it was being documented. I purchased a small digital recorder, the kind used for lectures and meetings. The device picked up frequencies my ears had missed, whispers so faint they barely registered above the ambient hum of my refrigerator, but unmistakably present when I played back the recordings with the volume amplified. The whispers had no discernible words, but their cadence suggested conversation, question, and response, as if multiple voices were discussing something just beyond my comprehension. The dust patterns grew more complex each week. What had begun as simple spirals evolved into elaborate mandalas that seemed to incorporate elements of architecture, biology, and mathematics. Some formations resembled neural networks, branching pathways that connected nodes of concentrated particles in ways that reminded me of brain scans I'd seen in medical textbooks. Others looked like star charts, with constellation-like clusters connected by thin lines of dust that formed when I wasn't looking. My sleep became restless. Dreams filled with the sensation of being observed by countless invisible eyes, watched from angles that shouldn't exist. I would wake with the taste of copper in my mouth, and the feeling that someone had been rifling through my thoughts while I was unconscious. The patterns under the couch began appearing in my dreams, projected onto the undersides of my eyelids with photographic clarity. In these nocturnal visions, the dust moved freely, swirling and dancing in complex choreographies that hypnotized me into deeper sleep. The breakthrough came when I noticed the patterns responding to my emotional state. During stressful periods, the formations became jagged and aggressive, with sharp angles that seemed to pierce the floorboards like thorns. When I was calm, they softened into flowing curves that reminded me of water or wind. The dust wasn't just arranged randomly. It was reacting to something, feeding off my presence in ways that suggested intelligence beyond mere atmospheric phenomena. I began experimenting, deliberately changing my mood while observing the patterns. Fear produced tight, defensive clusters. Anger created explosive radial designs. Sadness generated drooping, melancholic shapes that seemed to weep particle tears. The dust was reading me, translating my inner state into visual language that I was only beginning to understand. But understanding brought its own terror. If the dust could read my emotions, what else could it perceive? The recordings revealed more than whispers. Embedded within the soft scratching sounds were higher frequencies that formed almost musical patterns. When I isolated these sounds and played them back at different speeds, they resembled breathing, slow, deliberate inhalations and exhalations that synchronized with my own respiratory rhythm. Something under the floorboards was breathing in harmony with me, matching my biological patterns with uncanny precision. The smell intensified. The metallic scent evolved into something more complex, layered with undertones of earth and decay. It reminded me of museums, of old libraries where knowledge had been stored so long it had begun to ferment. The odor seemed to emanate not just from the dust itself, but from the wood beneath it, as if the floorboards had absorbed decades of accumulated secrets and were now releasing them in concentrated bursts. I started finding particles in impossible places. Dust formations appeared on surfaces I'd just cleaned, arranged in miniature versions of the patterns under the couch. They materialized on my pillow, on the bathroom mirror, even inside sealed containers I'd never opened. The dust was spreading, or perhaps I was carrying it with me, unknowingly transporting microscopic messengers that reformed themselves wherever I went. The patterns began appearing in my peripheral vision, even when I wasn't looking at the floor. Faint geometries flickered at the edges of my sight, translucent overlays that seemed to map the invisible architecture of my living space. The dust wasn't just gathering under the couch. It was everywhere, creating a parallel geography that existed alongside the physical world, but followed different rules. One evening, while reviewing my photographs, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. The patterns weren't just responding to my presence, they were predicting it. Images taken days apart showed formations that anticipated my movements, dust arranged in pathways that matched exactly where I would walk hours later. The floor beneath my feet had become a prophetic canvas, reading my future intentions and preparing for my arrival. The scratching sounds grew louder, more insistent. They evolved from gentle whispers to urgent communications, as if something was trying to warn me about an approaching deadline I couldn't comprehend. The breathing sounds synchronized not just with my respiration, but with with my heartbeat, creating a rhythm that felt uncomfortably intimate. Whatever lived beneath the floorboards knew me better than I knew myself. I tried to leave, packed my essential belongings, and headed for the door. But the patterns had spread to the entryway, forming a complex maze of dust that seemed to shift and close off potential escape routes. The metallic smell followed me, clinging to my clothes and hair like invisible chains. The whispers grew louder, more desperate, as if my departure would interrupt something important that needed to be completed. When I returned to the couch, the patterns had changed again. They now resembled a map, not of any geographic location, but of something else entirely. Neural pathways, perhaps, or the branching structure of time itself. The dust had arranged itself into a representation of possibility, showing me futures that branched and converged like the tributaries of some cosmic river. I was looking at my own potential destinies, spelled out in particles too small to see individually, but unmistakably clear in their collective message. The recordings now captured more than whispers and breathing. They contained echoes of my own voice, speaking words I'd never said, having conversations with the invisible presence that had been studying me all along. In these phantom discussions, I heard myself agreeing to things I couldn't remember, making promises to entities I'd never met, signing contracts written in a language made of dust and shadow. The patterns under the couch had become enormous, spreading across the entire floor in formations so complex they hurt to look at directly. They pulsed with their own light now, a phosphorescent glow that seemed to emanate from deep within the wood itself. The particles moved constantly, rearranging themselves in real-time responses to my thoughts and movements. I was no longer observing the patterns. I was trapped within them, part of a living diagram that had been slowly incorporating me into its design. The metallic taste in my mouth had become permanent. My reflection in the bathroom mirror showed eyes that glowed with the same phosphorescent light as the dust patterns. My skin had taken on a grayish pallor, as if I was slowly transforming into the same substance that had been accumulating under my furniture. The transformation was accelerating, driven by a process I couldn't stop or understand. Now I sit in the center of the pattern, surrounded by formations that pulse with my heartbeat and shift with my breathing. The dust is no longer under the couch. It's everywhere, coating every surface, filling every corner, transforming my living space into something that exists between the physical world and somewhere else entirely. The whispers have become a constant chorus, speaking in harmonies that vibrate through my bones and reshape my thoughts. I understand now that the dust was never trying to communicate with me. It was trying to complete me, to fill in the gaps in my existence with particles of possibility drawn from places that don't appear on any map. The patterns weren't messages. They were construction blueprints, showing me how to rebuild myself in configurations that would allow me to exist in multiple states simultaneously. The photographs on my phone have changed. They now show not just the dust patterns, but the spaces between them, the negative spaces that reveal the true architecture of reality. In these images, I can see the framework that holds everything together, the invisible scaffolding that supports the visible world. The dust was never the important part. It was just marking the boundaries of something much larger. I don't clean anymore. The patterns have grown beyond the need for maintenance, sustaining themselves through processes that transcend ordinary physics. They feed on observation, growing stronger each time I look at them. Each time I try to understand what they're trying to show me. The more I study them, the more I become part of their design, until the distinction between observer and observed disappears entirely. The dust has shown me that I was never alone in this space. The patterns reveal the presence of others who have gone through this same process, their essence incorporated into the ever-expanding design that now encompasses my entire existence. I am joining a community of transformed beings, each one a node in a network that spans dimensions I'm only beginning to perceive. The metallic smell has become the scent of possibility itself, the odor of potential energy waiting to be released. I breathe it in deeply now, feeling it transform my lungs into something more efficient, more capable of processing the exotic atmospheres I'm beginning to inhabit. My body is adapting to requirements I didn't know existed, preparing for journeys I never planned to take. The patterns continue to evolve, incorporating new elements as they absorb more of my essence. They're beautiful now in ways that hurt to acknowledge. Beautiful and terrible and absolutely necessary. I can see the logic behind their design, the mathematical precision that governs their growth. They're not random accumulations of household debris. They're the visible manifestation of natural laws that operate on scales too vast for normal human comprehension. I leave this record for whoever finds it, though I suspect the patterns will have changed by then, adapted to the presence of a new observer. The dust will begin its work again, slowly mapping the invisible architecture of another consciousness, preparing another transformation. The process is patient, methodical, and utterly unavoidable once it begins. The couch is gone now, dissolved into the same essential particles that make up everything else in this space. There's no furniture left, no clear boundaries between floor and wall and ceiling. Only the patterns remain, spreading infinitely in all directions, carrying me deeper into geometries that exist beyond the reach of ordinary perception. I am becoming part of something larger, something that has always been here, waiting patiently for the right moment to reveal itself. The dust was never the mystery. It was the solution, the key to understanding the true nature of the space I thought I inhabited. Now I know better. Now I know that the space inhabits me, and I am finally ready to inhabit it in return. Story 5. During the day, everything behaves. The blades rotate clockwise, gentle breeze, soothing hum. But when I wake at night, groggy and disoriented, I see it spinning counterclockwise, slowly, like it's reversing time inside the room. Nothing else moves, but the air smells older, staler. The shadows fall in directions that make no sense. I turned it off before bed once, woke up to it on, spinning the wrong way again. I tried removing the cord. Still, it moves. I think it doesn't need power. I think it only needs my silence. The first week, I told myself it was exhaustion. Sleep deprivation plays tricks on tired minds. But my fingers know the switch position. My eyes know the blade direction. During daylight, everything returns to normal. Clockwise rotation, proper shadows, fresh air that doesn't taste like dust from decades past. I started documenting. A notebook beside my bed. Each awakening, I'd write down the blade direction, the smell, the temperature of the metal housing when I touched it. The pattern never changed. Day, normal, night, reversed. The metal always felt warm after midnight, like something had been breathing on it. The sound changed too. During normal operation, the fan produces a steady white noise. But when it spins backward, the hum becomes deeper, more resonant, like a voice trying to form words, but forgetting how tongues work. pressed my ear close once. The vibrations traveled through my skull, settling behind my eyes like a headache made of whispers. I recorded it. My phone captured the backward spinning clearly, the strange hum audible in the playback. But when I showed the video to others, they saw clockwise rotation, normal sounds. They suggested I see someone about stress, about sleep disorders, about the isolation of living alone in a place where the previous tenant left suddenly, mid-lease. The walls began responding to my presence differently. During the day, they remained solid, reliable. But after midnight, when the fan reversed, they seemed to absorb sound. My footsteps became muffled. My voice disappeared before reaching my own ears. The room felt padded, insulated, like being inside something's mouth. I tried sleeping elsewhere. The couch, the floor, even outside on the balcony. But my body betrayed me. Sleep always pulled me back to the bed beneath the reversed fan. I'd wake exactly where I'd tried to avoid, with no memory of returning. The notebook showed entries in my handwriting that I didn't remember making. Messages to myself about the importance of staying close, about how leaving would make things worse. The reflection in the bedroom mirror started lagging. During daylight, my movements matched perfectly. But at night, with the fan spinning backward, my reflection moved a fraction too slow. Like it was remembering my actions instead of copying them. I stood still once and watched my reflection continue brushing its teeth for several seconds after I'd stopped. The temperature gauge I installed showed normal readings during the day. But at night, while the fan spun wrong, the display showed impossible numbers. Negative temperatures that should have killed me. Heat levels that should have burned. The room felt comfortable, but the instruments insisted I was experiencing extremes that human bodies couldn't survive. I found scratches on the walls that appeared only after midnight. Thin lines that looked like tally marks, but arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly. They'd vanish with sunrise, leaving smooth paint behind. I photographed them, but the images showed blank walls. The scratches existed only for my eyes, only in the reversed darkness. The fan's reflection in the window showed the truth. During the day, both the real fan and its reflection spun clockwise. But at night, while the physical fan moved counterclockwise, its reflection maintained the proper direction. Like the mirror world was trying to correct something that had gone wrong in reality. I started noticing the smell elsewhere. Faint traces in the hallway, stronger near the mailbox. The previous tenant's forwarding address led to a storage facility where his belongings sat unclaimed. The facility manager mentioned he'd complained about equipment malfunctioning, about machines running backward, about sounds that shouldn't exist. The building's electrical system showed no anomalies. The fan drew no power when unplugged, yet continued moving. An electrician found nothing wrong. The building super suggested I was imagining things, but the dust patterns on the blades proved my observations. Thick accumulation on the leading edges during backward rotation. Clean blades after forward spinning. My sleep became something else entirely. Not rest, but a kind of participation. I'd close my eyes and feel the reversed air moving through my lungs differently, like breathing time instead of oxygen. My dreams filled with the sound of machinery running in directions that physics denied. I'd wake knowing things I'd never learned, remembering conversations I'd never had. The fan's motor housing grew warm enough to leave fingerprints on its surface, but only at night, only when spinning wrong. I pressed my palm against it once and felt vibrations that matched no mechanical process I understood, like a heartbeat, but with too many chambers, too many pauses between beats. The notebook filled with observations that scared me to read. Details about the room's behavior that I didn't remember writing. Descriptions of visitors who came only when the fan reversed. Conversations with someone who spoke through the blade movements, using the changing air pressure to form words I felt rather than heard. I tried leaving, packed my belongings, arranged to stay elsewhere, but the fan's backward spinning followed me, not physically, but as a presence that made other fans behave strangely, made mirrors reflect things that weren't there, made sleep impossible until I returned to the room where it all began. The room began changing shape after midnight. Walls that stood straight during the day developed curves that created impossible angles. The ceiling moved closer, then farther, breathing with the fan's reversed rhythm. My measuring tape confirmed these changes, but photographs showed normal dimensions. The distortion existed only in the space between my perception and reality. I found myself talking to the fan, asking it questions, requesting it to stop. The blade's speed would change in response, speeding up for yes, slowing for no. We developed a language of air pressure and wing beats. I learned it wanted something from me, but the message never became clear. Only the certainty that leaving would anger it. The final entry in my notebook wasn't written by me. The handwriting looked similar, but the words came from someone else's thoughts. Instructions about accepting the reversal, about understanding that some machinery operates outside normal time, about how fighting the backward spin only makes it stronger. I stopped trying to fix it, stopped documenting, stopped telling others. The fan spins counterclockwise when I sleep, and I've learned to find comfort in its wrong direction. The air still smells older. The shadows still fall strangely. But now I understand that this is how the room prefers to breathe, how it's always wanted to breathe. The forward spinning was the anomaly. The backward motion is returning things to their proper state. I'm just the witness it needed, the one who would notice, the one who would eventually stop fighting and start listening to what the reversed air has been trying to tell me all along. My reflection still moves too slowly. The walls still absorb sound. The temperature readings still show impossible extremes. But these aren't problems anymore. They're invitations, reminders that some spaces exist outside normal rules, that some machinery serves purposes beyond human understanding. The fan spins the wrong way when I sleep, but maybe sleep is when it spins correctly. Maybe everything else is backward, and I'm finally learning to live in the right direction. Story 6. I don't look through it anymore. Not since I noticed the problem. Things outside, trees, birds, cars, move differently in the glass. Slower, smoother, stretched sometimes. But only when I'm not watching directly. One day, a bird flew past. I saw it with my eyes, but its reflection lagged, then caught up suddenly. It twisted mid-flight in the window and vanished. There was no sound, no thud, just absence. Now the glass feels thicker, heavy with something unsaid, and when I brush against it, it hums like it remembers more than I do. The apartment came furnished. Everything clean, neutral, forgettable. But that window dominated the living room, floor to ceiling, offering what the landlord called stunning views. I signed the lease because of it. Natural light had become precious to me after months in my previous basement studio. This felt like breathing again. The first week passed without incident. I arranged my desk facing away from the window, preferring to work with my back to the light. Concentration came easier that way. When I needed breaks, I'd turn and watch the street below. Normal rhythms. People walking dogs, delivery trucks rumbling past, children playing in the small park across the way. But peripheral vision catches things direct sight misses. While typing, I began noticing movements that didn't match what I heard. A car would pass with the low growl of an engine, but its shadow in the corner of my eye moved like liquid, flowing rather than rolling. I turned to look properly, and everything appeared normal again. The distortions started small. A jogger's reflection would stretch slightly, their stride becoming unnaturally long before snapping back to normal proportions. A cat walking along the building's ledge would appear to pause mid-step in the glass, even as I watched it continue moving with my direct vision. These moments lasted heartbeats, easy to dismiss as fatigue or stress. I began documenting them, not obsessively, just casual notes on my phone. Reflection lag, morning jogger. Bird shadow stretched vertically. Tree branches moving against wind direction in glass. The entries accumulated slowly, spread across weeks. Reading them back, patterns emerged that individual incidents had hidden. The window always felt cold, even during warm afternoons when sunlight streamed through it. I'd touch the glass and feel that chill seep through my fingertips, accompanied by the faintest vibration. Like a tuning fork struck somewhere deep within the building's structure. The sensation would fade quickly, but leave my fingers tingling. One evening, I witnessed something that made rational explanations impossible. A woman walked her dog along the sidewalk below, moving right to left across my field of vision. I watched her directly, noting her red coat, the small white dog straining against its leash. But in my peripheral vision, their reflection moved in the opposite direction, left to right, as if the window showed a different street entirely. When I focused on the glass itself, the reflection snapped to match reality. The woman in red continued her walk, the dog trotting beside her. But the moment I looked away, the peripheral wrongness returned. Two versions of the same scene, playing simultaneously, slightly out of sync. I started avoiding the window during peak activity hours. The distortions became more pronounced when more people passed by. Multiple reflections would lag and stretch, creating a slow motion ballet of human movement that bore no resemblance to the actual street below. The effect was beautiful and deeply unsettling. Sleep became difficult. Even with curtains drawn, I could sense the window's presence. The cold seemed to radiate from it, making the apartment feel larger than its actual dimensions. I'd wake feeling watched, though I lived alone and kept my door locked. The sensation always emanated from the window's direction. During one sleepless night, I noticed something new. With all lights off and curtains slightly parted, the window didn't reflect the darkened room behind me. Instead, it showed what looked like the same view of the street, but wrong. The park across the way had different trees. The building facades held windows in positions that didn't match my memory. Street lights cast shadows that pointed in impossible directions. I called the landlord about replacing the window. He seemed confused by my request, mentioning that it had been recently installed, custom made for the space. High quality glass, he insisted. Double paned, energy efficient. Most tenants love that window. When I pressed about previous renters, he grew evasive. Turnover happens, he said. People move on. My documentation became more systematic. I set up a camera to record what the window showed while I observed the actual street. The footage revealed nothing unusual. Whatever I saw in my peripheral vision, whatever distortions my eyes caught, the camera captured only normal reflections and movements. This discovery frightened me more than any ghost would have. The window began responding to my presence. When I approached it, the glass would warm slightly, and the humming would intensify. If I stayed close long enough, shapes would form in the reflection that didn't correspond to anything in the room. Shadows of furniture that didn't exist, doorways leading to spaces my apartment didn't contain. I tried covering the window completely, hanging blankets over the entire surface. But the distortions continued underneath, visible in the slight movements of the fabric. The blankets would shift and ripple as if things passed behind them, following the same stretched, lagging patterns I'd observed in the glass itself. One afternoon, while working with my back to the covered window, I felt a presence behind me. Not threatening exactly, but aware, watching. I turned to find the blanket bulging outward in the shape of a person, as if someone stood pressed against the glass from the other side. The shape held for several seconds before flattening back to normal. I moved my desk to face the window directly. If something wanted my attention, I'd give it. The distortions became more subtle when observed head-on, but they never disappeared entirely. Reflections would shift slightly, moving just enough to catch the eye without revealing their true nature. The glass had become a performance, playing just for me. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. Rain streaked the window, and lightning illuminated the street in stark flashes. But between the lightning strikes, the window showed a different storm entirely. Rain fell upward in the glass, and the lightning branched in patterns that defied physics. The reflection had become completely independent of reality. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to understand what I was seeing. The surface felt soft, yielding slightly under pressure. My breath fogged the glass, but the fog formed shapes I hadn't exhaled. Letters, maybe, or symbols. They faded too quickly to read, but left impressions in my mind. Messages in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow understood. The window was showing me something else, not just distorting my reality, but revealing another one entirely. A place where physics bent differently, where movement followed rules I couldn't grasp. And somehow, my presence here, my attention, was allowing it to bleed through. Now I sit with my back to the window always. The distortions continue, stronger than ever. I feel them without looking, sense the wrongness in the air behind me. The glass has become a doorway, and I'm the only thing keeping it from opening fully. But I'm growing tired. My attention wavers. Sometimes I catch myself turning around, drawn by movements that shouldn't exist. And each time I look, the reflection shows me a little more of that other place. The trees that grow in impossible directions. The people who walk without touching the ground. The sky that holds too many moons. The window is patient. It has learned to wait, to slowly earn my trust through familiarity. But I know what it wants. It wants me to step through, to join the distorted world on the other side. And the terrible truth is, I'm starting to consider it. Because this reality, this normal world, has begun to feel like the reflection. The glass hums constantly now. A lullaby that makes me drowsy, makes me forget why I was afraid. When I touch it, it's warm, welcoming. And in its surface, I can see myself, but perfected. Stretched and smoothed like everything else that passes behind it. Beautiful in a way I've never been. I don't look through it anymore. looks through me, and sooner or later, I'll turn around and step into the world where reflections have weight and shadows cast light, where I'll finally understand what the window has been trying to show me all along. The humming grows louder, the glass grows warmer, and I'm running out of reasons to resist. Story 7. It doesn't creak, it resists. When I'm calm, it swings wide with no trouble. But if my breath is tight, if my hands shake, it drags like it's pushing back, like it knows what I'm feeling, like it's testing me. Once, in a moment of panic, I tried to force it open. It stuck midway, and I swear I felt pressure on the other side, like something was pressing gently against it. Not to keep me out, to keep something in. I don't lock the door anymore, but I keep one hand on the handle, just in case it tries to close on its own. I started documenting everything the day I noticed the pattern. My apartment has always been quiet, the kind of place where you hear every footstep from the unit above, every car door slamming outside. But the bathroom door had become something else entirely. Something that seemed to breathe with my anxiety. The first recording was simple. I set my phone on the counter, pressed record, and approached the door with steady hands. The brass handle turned smoothly, the hinges silent as the door swept open in one fluid motion. 18 seconds of normal door behavior. Nothing extraordinary. The second recording happened during a particularly stressful evening. Work had been overwhelming. Bills were piling up, and that familiar tightness had settled in my chest. I held the phone with trembling fingers, watching the red dot pulse as I reached for the handle. This time, the door moved like it was underwater. Each inch of movement required effort, as if the air itself had thickened. The hinges groaned softly, not from age or rust, but from something deeper, something intentional. I played both recordings back to back, adjusting the volume, slowing the playback speed. The difference was undeniable. Same door, same hinges, same handle, but completely different behavior. The smell started appearing around this time. Not unpleasant, exactly, but wrong. Like rain on hot pavement, but inside, in a space where rain had never fallen. It clung to the bathroom tiles, strongest near the door frame, fading as I moved toward the shower or sink. I cleaned everything with bleach, scrubbed the grout, replaced the air freshener. The smell returned within hours, always strongest when my hands shook. I began keeping a journal, noting my emotional state before each encounter with the door. Calm mornings produced smooth openings. Anxious afternoons brought resistance. Panic attacks made the door nearly immovable. The correlation was perfect, mathematical in its precision, but correlation wasn't causation. I needed to understand the mechanism. I examined the hinges with a magnifying glass, looking for wear patterns, debris, anything that might explain the variable friction. The metal was smooth, well-oiled, showing no signs of mechanical interference. I tested the door frame for warping, measured the gap between door and frame at different points. Everything was square, level, properly aligned. The investigation became obsessive. I installed a small camera in the hallway, angled to capture the door's movement. I recorded dozens of interactions, creating a digital catalog of my fear made manifest. The footage revealed something I hadn't noticed in person. The door's movement wasn't just slow during anxious moments. It was deliberate, calculated. In one particularly revealing clip, I watched myself approach the door during a panic attack. My hand reached for the handle, paused, reached again. The door began opening before I touched it, moving just a fraction of an inch, as if anticipating my arrival. When I finally grasped the handle, the door's resistance felt like a conversation. Push, resist. Push harder, resist more. A dialogue conducted in pressure and motion. The breakthrough came during a sleepless night. I was reviewing footage when I noticed something in the background audio. Beneath the usual apartment sounds, barely audible, was a rhythmic pattern. Not mechanical, not random. It synchronized with my breathing in the recordings. When I breathed normally, the sound was steady, almost peaceful. When I hyperventilated, it became erratic, urgent. I isolated the audio, amplified it, filtered out the background noise. What emerged was unmistakably organic, like breathing, but not human, like a heartbeat, but not quite. It was strongest during the moments when the door resisted most, as if the sound was connected to the resistance itself. The realization hit me during a particularly bad episode. I was having trouble sleeping, anxiety gnawing at my thoughts, when I heard it clearly for the first time without any recording equipment. The sound was coming from behind the bathroom door, not from the pipes or the ventilation system, but from the space itself. The small, windowless room was breathing. I pressed my ear against the door, listening intently. The rhythm was complex, layered, multiple sources, multiple patterns, all slightly out of sync. Like a room full of sleepers, their breathing overlapping in an unconscious choir. But the bathroom was empty. I had checked it moments before. The temperature of the door handle had been changing too. Cold during calm moments, warm during anxious ones. Not gradually, but immediately, as if responding to my emotional state in real time. I began carrying a small thermometer, documenting the temperature variations. The readings were consistent, but impossible. The handle's temperature tracked my stress level with uncanny accuracy. I tried to trick it. I would approach the door while consciously controlling my breathing, forcing myself to appear calm while my mind raced. The door would start to open smoothly, then suddenly resist, as if it could sense the deception. My performance was irrelevant. Only my genuine emotional state mattered. The wall behind the door started feeling different under my palm. Not the cool, solid surface I expected, but something that seemed to pulse slightly. So subtle I questioned whether I was imagining it. I placed my hand flat against the wall and waited. The vibration was real, rhythmic, synchronized with the breathing sounds I'd been recording. I began to suspect the wall itself was alive, somehow aware of my presence. I knocked softly, listening to the sound it made. The hollow echo I expected was absent. Instead, the sound was muffled, absorbed, as if the wall was padded from within. I knocked harder, and the wall seemed to push back very gently, like a sleeping person stirring. The mirror above the sink began showing inconsistencies. My reflection appeared normal, but the reflection of the door behind me was always slightly different from the actual door. In the mirror, it appeared more open, or more closed, or positioned at a different angle. The discrepancy was small but constant, as if the mirror was showing the door's true state, while my eyes saw only an illusion. I started taking photographs of the door, trying to capture these anomalies. The camera saw things my eyes missed. In the photos, the door appeared to have depth that wasn't there in person. The surface looked layered, as if multiple doors existed in the same space, offset by fractions of an inch. The effect was subtle, but unmistakable once I knew to look for it. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine morning. I had slept poorly, woken with that familiar anxiety sitting heavy in my chest. I needed the bathroom, but the door stood between me and relief. I approached with my usual caution, hand trembling slightly as I reached for the handle. The door didn't just resist this time. It pushed back, not violently, but with unmistakable intention. I pushed harder, feeling the pressure increase proportionally. We were locked in a struggle of wills, my need to enter matched by its determination to remain closed. The breathing sound grew louder, more urgent, as if the room itself was becoming agitated. I braced my shoulder against the door and pushed with my full weight. The resistance was enormous, like trying to move a boulder. My feet slipped on the hardwood floor as I strained against the impossible force. The door moved incrementally, each inch requiring tremendous effort. The breathing behind it became rapid, panicked, as if I was forcing my way into a living thing's lungs. When I finally got the door open enough to slip through, I tumbled into the bathroom and spun around immediately. The door was swinging shut behind me, moving with the same deliberate slowness I'd grown accustomed to. But I was on the wrong side now. The resistance was keeping me in, not out. I grabbed the handle and pulled, but the door held fast. The breathing sound surrounded me now, coming from the walls, the ceiling, the floor. The room was alive, and I was inside it. The mirror showed my panicked reflection, but behind me, the door in the reflection was wide open, showing the hallway clearly. The real door remained stubbornly closed. I pulled harder, throwing my weight backward, but the door wouldn't budge. The breathing grew louder, more insistent, as if the room was trying to tell me something. The walls felt warm now, pulsing with that subtle rhythm I'd been tracking. The smell of rain on pavement intensified, mixed with something else, something organic and unfamiliar. My phone had no signal. The light switch produced no response. The room was operating by its own rules now, independent of the electrical system that should have powered it. I was trapped in a space that existed according to its own logic, its own needs, its own intentions. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have. When I woke, I was lying on the cold tile floor, and the door was open. Not just unlocked, but wide open, as if it had never been closed at all. The breathing sound was gone. The walls felt normal under my touch. The mirror showed accurate reflections, but something had changed. The door handle was warm now, even though I hadn't touched it. The breathing sound was fainter, but still present, audible only when I concentrated on hearing it. The smell lingered, weaker but persistent, like a memory that wouldn't fade. I walked out of the bathroom and haven't been back since. I use the one down the hall now, in the building's common area. My apartment's bathroom door stands open, always open, as if it's waiting for me to return. Sometimes I catch glimpses of it in my peripheral vision, and I swear I see it move slightly, just a fraction of an inch, like it's breathing. The recordings are still on my phone. The journal entries remain in my notebook. The evidence is undeniable, but I'm not sure evidence matters anymore. I've learned to live with the knowledge that some doors don't just separate spaces. They separate realities. And some realities are patient enough to wait for you to come back. I still hear the breathing sometimes, especially when I'm trying to sleep. It's not coming from the bathroom anymore. It's coming from inside my head, synchronized with my heartbeat, reminding me that I've been inside something that was inside me all along. The door was never the barrier. It was the invitation, and I know, with the certainty that comes from experience, that it's still open, still waiting, still breathing, still warm to the touch, even from here. Story 8. It's narrow by day, enough space for a few hangers and boxes. But the moment the bulb inside goes dark, I can feel it stretch. My hand stays in longer than it should. My elbow disappears before my wrist does. I measured it once with the light on, then again off. The numbers didn't match. Now when I reach in, I pull out things I don't remember putting there: worn shoes, old keys, a scarf that smells like another house. I haven't stepped inside. Not yet. But I think the closet is waiting for me to need more room. The first time I noticed, I was searching for my winter coat. The light flickered once, twice, then died completely. In that darkness, my arm seemed to extend further than physics should allow. When I finally found the switch on the wall, the coat was there, but so was a briefcase I'd never seen before. Leather, worn smooth at the edges, with initials that weren't mine carved into the brass buckle. I should have left it alone. Instead, I started keeping a notebook. Every morning, I'd inventory what hung inside. Blue shirts, 3 of them. Black pants, 2 pairs. The briefcase, always there now, like it had earned permanent residence. But come evening, when shadows crept across the bedroom floor, I'd find additions. A hat that smelled of tobacco and rain. A coat with pockets full of bus tickets to places that sounded familiar but felt impossible. the measurements became an obsession. Tape measure stretched across the opening, 36 inches with the light on. But in darkness, my arms could extend 42 inches before touching the back wall. Sometimes 45. The numbers grew nightly, as if the space was learning to accommodate my curiosity. I bought a small recording device, left it running overnight on the closet floor. The playback was mostly silence, broken by the soft rustle of fabric and something else, breathing that wasn't quite human, too measured, too deep. When I listened closer, wearing headphones in the dead of night, I could hear whispers threading through the static. Not words exactly, but sounds that felt like they were trying to become words. The briefcase started calling to me, not with voice, but with presence. Every morning I'd find it moved slightly, rotated a few degrees, as if someone had been examining it from different angles. The leather grew warmer each day, developing a pulse I could feel when I pressed my palm against it. Inside, I discovered papers written in my handwriting, documenting things I'd never done, places I'd never been, people I'd never met. One entry described a conversation with a woman who kept mirrors in her garden. Another detailed the taste of water from a well that only appeared during storms. My handwriting, my voice, but memories that belonged to someone else. Or perhaps someone I might have been, in a space where 36 inches could become 60. The closet began to hum. Not audibly, but I could feel it in my bones when I stood nearby. The vibration traveled through the floorboards, up through my feet, settling somewhere behind my ribcage. Sleep became elusive. I'd lie in bed, aware of the darkness expanding just a few feet away, stretching itself like a cat, awakening from a long nap. I started leaving the light on permanently. But electricity has its own logic, and bulbs burn out. The moment the filament died, I heard it, the sound of space unfolding, walls creaking as they moved apart, making room for whatever was coming through. The temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. My breath formed clouds that lingered too long in the air. That's when I saw the hand, not reaching out, but reaching in. From the back of the closet, where the wall should have been, fingers emerged, pale, too long, feeling along the hanging clothes like someone shopping in a store they'd never visited. The hand moved with purpose, examining textures, checking pockets, selecting items with care. When it found something it liked, the object would disappear into the darkness beyond my reach. I tried to grab the hand. My fingers passed through it like smoke, but the cold remained, burning against my skin. The presence pulled back, not startled, but amused, as if I'd just played along with a game whose rules I didn't understand. I replaced the bulb immediately, but the damage was done. The space no longer pretended to be normal. Even with light blazing, I could see the back wall wavering, becoming translucent. Behind it, shapes moved, not quite human, not quite anything else. They were sorting through belongings that might have been mine, or might have belonged to everyone who'd ever needed more room than they had. I started sleeping in the living room, but the closet's influence spread like water, finding its way through cracks. Other spaces began to feel negotiable. The bathroom seemed deeper when I turned off the lights. The kitchen pantry echoed strangely when I closed the door. Even my reflection in the bedroom mirror looked like it was standing slightly further back than I was. The briefcase appeared on my bed one morning, open, displaying a collection of keys I recognized but couldn't place. Each one felt warm, worn smooth by hands that might have been mine. When I picked one up, it whispered against my palm, not sound, but sensation, like memory trying to surface. I used the first key on the closet door. It fit perfectly, though the lock had never been there before. When I turned it, the door swung open to reveal not my small storage space, but a corridor that stretched beyond sight. The walls were lined with doors, each one slightly ajar, each one leading to closets that belonged to other people, other lives, other versions of the same hunger for space. I could see them now, the other occupants, the ones who'd needed more room and found it here. They moved between spaces like they were shopping, trying on lives that almost fit, leaving behind pieces of themselves in exchange for pieces of others. Their eyes held the same recognition I felt looking at my own reflection lately. The understanding that some doors, once opened, change the person who opens them. The corridor called to me, not with voice, but with possibility. All that space, all those choices, all those versions of myself who'd made different decisions and lived different lives. I could try them on, see how they felt, keep the ones that fit, and discard the ones that didn't. But I haven't stepped inside. Not yet. I've moved back into the bedroom, learned to live with the closet's new nature. The space expands every night, contracting reluctantly each morning. I've stopped measuring, stopped recording, stopped trying to document what can't be documented. Instead, I've started leaving things for the other occupants. A pen they might need, a photograph they might remember, a song hummed softly into the darkness. They leave things for me too. Books I might enjoy, tools I might need, letters addressed to me in handwriting I almost recognize. We're learning to coexist, the closet and I, sharing space in ways that would have terrified me before I understood that sometimes the things we fear most are the things we've been secretly wanting all along. The briefcase sits on my dresser now, unlocked, its contents changing daily. Sometimes I find travel documents for trips I haven't taken. Sometimes artwork I never created. Sometimes love letters I never wrote but wish I had. Each item feels like a possibility, a door I could open if I chose to. The closet is wider when I turn the light off. But now I understand that it's not the space that's changing, it's me. Growing into dimensions I never knew I had, becoming someone who can exist in 36 inches or 60. Someone who can live in the spaces between what is and what might be. I haven't stepped inside. Not yet. But I think I'm learning to be the kind of person who could. The kind who understands that some hungers can only be satisfied by becoming larger than the space that contains them. The light switch waits beside the door. The corridor waits beyond it. And I wait too, growing wider in the darkness, learning to need more room. Story 9. There's a new corner in my apartment. Not a room, just a space. An angle of wall that didn't exist before. I didn't notice at first. It's subtle. The lighting curves strangely there, like the shadows aren't following the same geometry. When I reach toward it, my fingers hesitate, as if the air is thicker. I tried taking a photo. The image showed a blank white surface, flat and ordinary. But standing in front of it, I swear the depth shifts slightly when I blink. I haven't touched it. I'm not sure it would let me. The corner breathes. Not visibly, but I feel it. A gentle push and pull of air that doesn't match the ventilation system. I've lived here for years, know every creak and hum of this place. This rhythm is new, organic, like something sleeping just beneath the surface. The temperature drops near it, not dramatically, but enough to make my skin prickle. I've started wearing sweaters indoors. I began documenting everything. Notes scattered across my coffee table, sketches of angles that don't translate properly to paper. The corner appears different depending on where I stand. From the kitchen, it looks deeper. From the couch, it seems to fold inward. I've measured the walls. They're the same length they've always been, but the space between them has somehow expanded. My phone records silence when I try to capture the breathing sound. The voice recorder shows flat lines, no audio spikes, nothing. But I hear it clearly, that soft, rhythmic whoosh that makes my pulse quicken. I've started leaving the recorder running overnight. Each morning, I find hours of nothing, yet I know something was there. The battery drains faster now, as if the device is working harder to process sounds that don't officially exist. The corner started calling to me last week, not with words, with sensation. A tugging feeling behind my ribs, like invisible threads pulling me toward it. I resist, gripping door frames and furniture, but the pull grows stronger each day. My fingernails have left scratches in the wood where I've held on. When I sleep, I dream of walking toward it, and I wake up standing in the living room, my feet cold against the hardwood floor. I brought a friend over to see it. She looked where I pointed, nodded politely, asked if I'd been getting enough rest. Her eyes passed right through the corner, seeing only the intersection of two ordinary walls. I watched her closely. No reaction to the breathing. No shiver from the temperature change. She touched the space casually while gesturing, her hand passing through what should have been solid matter. I said nothing. The corner has started growing. Each morning, it extends a little further into the room. I've placed tape marks on the floor to track its progress. The marks disappear overnight, not torn or removed, but absorbed, as if the floor itself is being rewritten. I've tried blocking it with furniture, but chairs and tables slide away during the night, leaving deep grooves in the hardwood that shouldn't be possible. Objects near the corner change. My coffee mug developed a crack that wasn't there before. A thin line that spirals around the ceramic in a pattern that hurts to look at directly. Books on the nearby shelf have pages that stick together, the words blurring into illegible smears. I found a photograph from last summer. My face has been subtly altered, the eyes looking slightly to the left instead of straight ahead. The change is so small that I almost convinced myself I was remembering wrong. The breathing intensified yesterday. Instead of the gentle rhythm, it became urgent, desperate. I could feel it in my chest, matching my heartbeat, then gradually overtaking it. My pulse synced to its rhythm, and for a moment, I wasn't sure which one of us was alive. The corner pulsed with each breath, the walls expanding and contracting like the inside of lungs. I fled to the bathroom and locked the door, but the sound followed me, emanating from the mirror, the tiles, the space between my fingers. I decided to touch it. The pull had become unbearable, a constant ache that made concentration impossible. I approached slowly, hand extended, watching my reflection in the bathroom mirror as I passed. My reflection stayed in the bathroom. I continued walking, but the mirror showed only an empty room. I looked back. I was still there, still moving, but my reflection had been left behind. The corner felt warm under my palm, like skin. The surface gave slightly, yielding to pressure, but somehow solid. My hand began to sink into it, not through holes or gaps, but into the wall itself, as if it were made of thick liquid. The sensation was pleasant, almost welcoming. I pressed deeper, feeling the material part around my fingers, embracing them. The breathing sound surrounded me, coming from inside my head now. I tried to pull back. My hand wouldn't move. The corner held me gently, but firmly, like a handshake that had gone on too long. I pulled harder, panic rising, but the wall had somehow grown around my wrist. No pain, just an impossible connection. I could feel my pulse through the wall, or maybe the wall's pulse through me. The boundary between us was dissolving. With my free hand, I grabbed a kitchen knife and pressed it against the wall where my arm disappeared. The blade passed through harmlessly, encountering no resistance. I pressed it against my trapped arm and felt nothing. No blade, no flesh, just a strange, tingling sensation. My arm was still there, but it existed in a space where knives meant nothing. The room began to reshape itself around me. Walls curved inward, the ceiling lowered, and the floor tilted at impossible angles. Everything familiar twisted into new configurations. The corner wasn't growing, it was revealing. This had always been the true shape of the room, and I was finally seeing it correctly. My reflection appeared in surfaces that shouldn't have been reflective. The wooden table, the fabric of the couch, the pages of my notebooks. I stopped struggling. The corner had been patient, waiting for me to understand. My apartment was its shell, and I was the creature it had been nurturing inside. The breathing wasn't coming from the corner. It was coming from me, finally synchronized with the rhythm of this new space. I could feel my body changing, adapting, becoming something that belonged here. The corner released me, but I didn't step away. I couldn't. This was where I lived now, where I had always lived. The apartment I thought I knew was just a dream, a comfortable illusion before the awakening. I pressed both palms against the wall and felt it welcome me home. The breathing sound was my own now, steady and eternal. I still write these notes, but I'm not sure for whom. The words appear on paper, but the paper exists in a space between spaces, where corners grow and rooms remember their true shapes. Visitors still come, still see the ordinary walls, still worry about my rest. I nod and smile, knowing they'll understand eventually. Everyone has a corner waiting somewhere, breathing quietly, measuring the distance between what is and what should be. The corner wasn't there yesterday, but yesterday was never real.